All right, so I guess since we're transitioning to a new section, were there any pressing questions, or I can't see, so I'm relying on you, Chris.
There's nothing in the chats.
Okay, well, folks, if you have any questions, go ahead and start throwing them in there, and we'll continue on, and we'll come back to them at our next section point. So we've talked a little bit about capitalism and why it doesn't work, and why social democracy and reformist type ideas also don't work because they don't address the underlying issues with capitalism. So socialism is the idea that we are trying to address those underlying concerns. So what exactly does that look like? You could define socialism in many different ways, and of course there are many different ways. So we're just going to try to hit kind of the big picture here, and then we can go more into it. A lot of socialist thought started originally in the workplace, in the economy, that, as we had mentioned in the very beginning slide, capitalism kind of came out of the transition from the more feudal, agrarian sort of era into this industrial economy type of era. And so when that happened and people, moved from rural farms to the city to work wages in workplaces, that was essentially a very new thing in history. So we've been kind of struggling with that concept ever since. So socialism kind of started there, saying, well, part of the problem is that we go work in our workplaces, we go work in industry and things, and we don't have any say-so over our working conditions, what we're producing, what we're going to do with what we're producing. Is it really the thing our community even needs? None of those questions are addressed. So one way you could think of socialism is workplace democracy. We're asking for the workers to be able to make those decisions together in a democratic way, to own the means of production, take ownership of what they're producing in their workplace and why they're producing it and what their working conditions are and all those things. So that's one way to look at it. But you could expand it beyond a single workplace into looking at the economy as a whole. That when we talk about a socialist economy, we're talking about a more democratic form of managing the economy as a whole than just throwing everything in the market and letting CEOs like throw money at each other. We want to include everyone in the decision making of the economy because, let's face it, the economic decisions impact everybody. And that's even beyond workplaces. We can talk about it having democracy in one workplace, but let's say if that workplace is doing some kind of industry that might end up with toxic runoff or pollution or something like that, that runoff might end up in a stream or a watershed or something that goes down and affects other communities. And so now you have this question of, okay, that workplace was democratic, but the effects of their decisions are affecting this other community down here. So we want to create an economic system that actually includes everyone, that includes not just all the workers, but all of the people of the community and all of the surrounding communities to get together to make these big economic decisions, that's best for what the people of that community and region and all actually want and need. And a lot of that is placed under direct community control. Instead of having the private property where some capitalist claims exclusive ownership over it, we instead say some of those resources, and they could be natural resources, but they could also be the factories and all themselves, right? The means of production. We call that the commons, and it's owned by everybody and managed by everybody in the community. A third way I think to think about it that doesn't get talked about enough is also just in the sense of democracy itself, that when we're making decisions that could impact others, how do we make a decision and include them? What do we mean by an inclusive decision-making process? And what happens when two people in that process strongly disagree with each other? They have some kind of conflict here. We need a way to resolve that conflict in a fair way that's taking everyone's opinions, but also their human rights and things into account. And that's something that's, again, glossed over by the capitalist market system. It's whoever has the most money, they get to buy the thing and put the thing there. And it doesn't matter if you get dirty air or dirty water or, terrible working conditions or whatever it is. The person that owns it said that that's what they want. We don't want to do that, right? We want to have this inclusive, grassroots, democratic, participatory structure where everyone is included in those important decisions. So, you have any thoughts, Chris?
Yeah, on that last point, it's also, this is where, actually having democracy comes into play, right?
Mhm.
It seems like every few years people realize that America is not a democracy, that we're an oligarchy,
Right.
and it gets declared high, from the mountaintops by people. But the reality is the U.S. was, founded by oligarchs for oligarchs, right? This was the plan the entire time around. I once had someone tell me that, well, the founding fathers weren't wealthy to the point of the 1%. And I went and I looked and I broke it down, and that's actually false. Something like 3 out of the top 5 richest presidents were from that original era. The people who signed the Declaration of Independence were the oligarchs, and they wrote a constitution and founded a country that was made to serve them, not the common man. So that's why it's really important. And if you look, you apply that into modern current events. You look at something like Medicare for all, where over 90% of Democrats support it, over 50% of Republicans, over 60% of all citizens support Medicare for all, but it can't even get a vote because we don't have democratic representation, right? And we can talk about direct democracy versus representative democracy. Those are theoretical conversations we can have, but when we're talking about 300 million people, there's probably going to be some kind of representation, right? It's just we. How many people have been in an organizational meeting and 10 people can't have a civil conversation? Let alone 300 million. So, direct democracy is not only a systemic change, but a cultural change has to take place. That people show up to community meetings and people, are actively civically engaged and things like that we can move towards. But even within it, looking at our current system, the representative democracy that we have is showing it's, consistently shooting down publicly popular ideas, right? The number of people that a strict abortion restriction is very small. Most people want some restrictions, but we're about to let 9 people remove access to an essential medical care, or potentially, right? Because they're going to pass it off to the states. And in the case of the Senate, we're going to let 1 or 2 people say we're not going to defend this, right? Manchin gets to say no, and when Manchin says no, it's over, right? One person really got to decide that we're not going to, protect the right of reproductive freedom legislatively. And this has been a failure of the Democrats for a long time. They've had many opportunities where they controlled both parties or both houses of Congress and the presidency, and they could have passed it. Obama openly said that protecting it legislatively was not a priority for him.
Mhm.
And now look where we're at, right? The Supreme Court swung under Trump, and we're on the brink of losing it. So, it's a very hard, at times to kind of understand what this different kind of system looks like. When you're talking about community management, education and healthcare always come to mind. But it can even talking about, my city budget. In my city budget, the public works department and the police department ask for the same amount of money in their budget request. The police department got 99% and the public works department got 30, right? So in my town, I tell people, if you think the roads suck, blame the cops, because that's where the money went. And that's how our top-down, management system works. You're told you have this much money to spend, go, right? And that goes with education dollars and healthcare dollars and all that kind of stuff. And when you start community managing it, the whole thing flips, right? The whole dynamic of power flips, because what happens under community control is your local, health board, which is elected from providers, and the doctors are elected, but also the community is elected, and they say we need this much, and the tax rates and things like that, and the revenue raising tools are set to get that much money, right? Because we're setting our goals based on need and not profit. Whereas what we have right now is they're basically, it gets dropped down. Look at education, right? We just underfunded until we can privatize it. And that's both parties who are engaged in that. So when you get this top down, profit motives just keep pushing, the amount of resources available down, and then they get split, into smaller and smaller bits to get to everyone. When we flip that, when we have community control instead of top down control, we're able to say this is what we need, and then plan the economy, plan the taxes, plan revenue outlets, to achieve that goal and make sure that we're fulfilling the needs, regardless of the profits.
Yeah, exactly. So, when we say democracy on this slide, we're not talking about the propagandized version of democracy that the red and blue parties talk about, where every 4 years you get to vote for one of their oligarchs. We're talking about an actual form of grassroots democracy where you have more direct say in how things are decided. It's not decided top down, it's decided bottom up, in a different sort of way. And it's a focus on the questions we asked at the very beginning. What do we want out of life? What do we want? How do we want to live? We want to make those decisions first and then set the economy and all to go along with that, instead of the opposite, where they set things top down to drive more profits, and that's it. So it's a very big shift in culture and mindset, not just institutions and all.